The sun had just begun its gracious descent, casting an amber glow over Cedar Ridge, our neat suburban enclave that prided itself on pristine lawns and cookie-cutter homes. It was the kind of place where the hedges stood as sentinels, trimmed with the precision of a military haircut, and mailboxes gleamed like soldiers in full parade dress. In this perfectly manicured paradise, there was little room for deviation, or so Karen believed. Karen, with her immaculate bob and steely gaze, patrolled the neighborhood like a hawk with a vendetta. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the Homeowners Association, our little empire of regulations. She had a nose for deviation, and my modest display of solar lights had apparently caught her attention. I had spaced them along my walkway like stars guiding a ship safely to shore, a nod to both aesthetics and practicality. But to Karen, these lights were an affront, a breach of some unspoken covenant. Her letter was a bolt from the blue, formal, pristine, and dripping with condescension. An official warning, it decreed, citing an obscure clause about excessive decorative lighting. I could almost hear her voice in the printed words, each syllable a calculated barb. Excessive. A word that hung in the air like a dubious perfume. I pondered this as I sat on my porch, the sun now a mere whisper on the horizon, my solar lights flickering to life in a symphony of soft illumination. They seemed to nod in agreement with the rhythm of the evening crickets. The fine was absurd, but I felt no anger, only a deep-seated amusement at the irony of it all. Here was a woman who feared light, while I simply embraced its gentle glow. Karen's first salvo was a small thing, a pebble tossed into a pond, yet its ripples spread, mingling with the currents of my thoughts. I imagined her poring over the HOA manual, a tome as thick and impenetrable as her own convictions, marking infractions with the zeal of a censor. But, for all her authority, for all the weight of her words, she had not reckoned with the likes of me. There was a certain quiet power in my resolve, a steadfastness she couldn't begin to fathom. I smiled to myself, a plan forming like an artist's sketch on a blank canvas. I would respond, not with anger or defiance, but with creativity, an illumination of my own making, drawing not from spite, but from a place of serene mischief. I envisioned the HOA office ablaze with light, a radiant counterpoint to its usual shadowy solemnity. It would be a beacon, a statement, a testament to my philosophy that light, in whatever form it takes, should never be stifled. The evening deepened around me, a velvet cloak studded with stars, and I breathed in the cool night air, feeling its calm settle into my bones. I would wait, bide my time, and when the moment was right, I would act. Until then, I would let Karen think she had won this round. For now, I was content to watch my solar lights twinkle, each one a small victory in the gathering dusk. As dusk descended once more upon our meticulously curated neighborhood, the absurdity of the citation still burned in my chest. Too many solar lights, they had declared, as if my modestly illuminated pathway was a beacon of rebellion. I glanced at the neatly printed letter from the HOA, its bureaucratic lingo dripping with condescension and perceived authority. It was a reminder of their omnipresence, an invisible hand guiding our lives with an iron grip dressed in business casual. Their hypocrisy knew no bounds. Each home, a cookie-cutter resemblance to its neighbor dressed in drab conformity, save for my humble abode with its cheerful glow. Yet, I was the offender. My solar lights, simple beacons of sustainability, were deemed an eyesore amidst the mundane uniformity. The day following their decree, whispers began to circulate, snaking their way through hedgerows and over white picket fences. Neighbors exchanged glances and knowing nods, their expressions a blend of sympathy and self-righteous satisfaction. It was an unspoken sport, this parade of judgments. The HOA had given them a target, and they took to it with relish. I could feel the eyes on me as I went about my routine, a delicate dance of feigned indifference and silent resilience. The narrative was being sculpted without my consent, each neighbor the sculptor chiseling away at my character. But I was not one to be easily chipped. The HOA office sat at the edge of the community, its facade as unassuming as the petty tyrants it housed. A simple building, yet it loomed large, a monument to mundane oppression. And so, one evening, in the quiet hours when the world turns inward, I set out with a plan as luminous as the solar lights they so despised. Boxes of lights clinked softly in the back of my car, a symphony of defiance. As I approached the office, the irony of my mission was not lost on me. To illuminate their ignorance, to shine a light on the ridiculousness of their rules. It was a simple act, yet one weighted with significance. One by one, the lights found their places, lining the path to the office with an ethereal glow. They flickered to life, a constellation in the concrete jungle, each bulb a silent testament to resilience. The process was almost meditative, each light planted with purpose, a star in a galaxy of rebellion. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on me. Lighting up an office that thrived in shadows, in unchallenged authority and unseen power, but standing there, bathed in the glow of my defiance, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This was my voice, each light a word in a language of resistance. The following days were a blur of raised eyebrows and hushed conversations. The reactions were mixed, an alchemy of admiration and outrage. The HOA, predictably, was not amused. Their response was swift, a letter even sterner than the last, filled with threats of consequences and legalese. But in their haste to punish, they overlooked the simple truth I had illuminated. The neighborhood had become a little brighter, a little more aware, a little less afraid of the shadows. And as I strolled past the now infamous office, I couldn't help but smile. The lights remained, a steadfast reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can light up the darkest corners. The aftermath of my luminously defiant display lingered in the air like the scent of burnt toast. It was hard to ignore the murmurings that now danced through the neighborhood, whispers tangled in the wind like strands of forgotten secrets. The heart of the cul-de-sac had transformed into a stage, and I, unwittingly, had become the town crier. The night after lighting up the HOA office, a curious symphony of reactions began to unfold. The glow of my rebellion hadn't dissipated with the sunrise. Instead, it had left a phosphorescent imprint on the minds of those who passed the once shadowy office. It was as if I had turned on the sun and refused to let it set. The sun. Neighbors, old and young, walked their dogs past my house with a deliberate slowness, their eyes lingering a fraction too long on my well-lit lawn. Some shook their heads, a mixture of irritation and admiration flickering across their faces. Others offered me brief nods, their silent approval like a secret handshake exchanged under the cloak of suburban normalcy. The air felt thicker now, laden with an unspoken tension that simmered just below the surface. I found myself watching from behind the curtains, a quiet observer in this suburban theater. There was power in the clandestine, a satisfaction in seeing the ripples of my action spread like ink in water. In moments of solitude, I pondered my motives. Was this a battle of principles or a quest for validation? The lines blurred, and in that haze, I found a sense of liberation. They wanted darkness, but I had given them light, a glaring, undeniable truth against the monotony of their rules. Days passed, and the HOA, fuming with bureaucratic indignation, was trapped in a quagmire of their own making. Rumor had it the board was divided, their once unified front now a mosaic of cracks. Karen, the orchestrator of my original fine, had retreated into silence. Her authority questioned, her power dimmed by an unexpected force. I wondered if her office still glowed at night, a beacon of unintended irony. It wasn't long before I noticed a subtle shift in the neighborhood's landscape. A few extra solar lights began to sprout in flower beds and along pathways, small acts of rebellion flickering to life. Emboldened by my defiance, they joined this quiet resistance, their lights tiny stars in our suburban sky. And yet amid the change, a question lingered. Was it enough? Could a single act pierce the armor of an institution so deeply entrenched in its own righteousness? The answer lay hidden in the shadows, beyond the reach of my lights. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon. I stepped outside, the cool grass beneath my feet grounding me in the present. The sky bled into shades of twilight, and in that tranquil moment, I watched as my neighbors flicked on their new lights, one by one. Together, we illuminated the night, a constellation of resilience glowing defiantly against the dusk. A sense of camaraderie settled over the neighborhood. The lights weren't just decoration, they were silent protests, glowing symbols of unity and quiet defiance. We had become our own constellation, bound by a shared purpose, our lights charting a course through the darkness. In the end, it wasn't about solar lights or HOA fines. It was about the power of one voice, amplified through the prism of solidarity. And as I stood there, a part of something larger than myself, I knew we had sparked more than just electrical circuits. We had ignited a flame. The evening was heavy with anticipation as residents gathered around the HOA office, a modest building that now pulsed with an unexpected brilliance. Like moths to an incandescent flame, they came, drawn not by curiosity alone, but by a shared sense of silent rebellion. I stood among them, feeling the hum of unity beneath the surface. My heart beat in time with the fluttering lights that adorned the office, each bulb a testament to our unspoken defiance. We were not just individuals with grievances, we were a community reclaiming its spirit. The lights glowed in vibrant hues, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the manicured lawns. It was both a spectacle and a statement, a vivid, luminous protest against the petty tyranny that had crept into our lives through the iron grip of the HOA. Karen had been a storm, her rules a relentless downpour, drowning our small joys in a sea of bureaucracy. But tonight, the sun had returned, and it shone through these lights, each one a droplet of hope. I meandered through the crowd, feeling the weight of their eyes, sensing their silent nods of approval. The air thrummed with shared purpose. As if speaking the unspeakable, we communicated in glances and gestures, stepping to a rhythm that only we could hear. Amidst the tableau of colors, I paused to reflect on how we got here. Karen had wielded power with a manicured fist, her grievances as numerous as her unfounded fines. It wasn't just the solar lights. It was the way she watched us from her porch. Her disapproval, a tangible force that clung to us like a second skin. We had all felt it, that itch of irritation at her constant meddling. But tonight, the very thing she had sought to snuff out illuminated her own realm, irony in its purest form. The office, her fortress, now a beacon that revealed more than her dominion ever could. The crowd shifted as Karen emerged, her face an unreadable mask. If she felt the sting of the spectacle, she hid it well. Perhaps, in her world, this was just another attempt at control. She stepped into the glow, her silhouette stark against the brightness. This was her moment as much as ours, a reckoning of sorts. The lights danced around her, relentless in their illumination, refusing to be dimmed by her presence. I watched as her eyes swept the scene, taking in the silent rebellion. There was a flicker in her gaze, perhaps a realization of the futility of her ironclad rules against the resilience of collective will. She opened her mouth, perhaps to assert some semblance of authority, but the words faltered, lost in the overwhelming radiance. In that moment, Karen was no longer the storm. She was merely a shadow against the light of our resolve. The sense of community that she had tried to suppress now stood as an undeniable testament to our camaraderie, glowing defiantly in every vibrant hue. We lingered in the luminescence, basking in the aftermath of our quiet victory. Karen retreated, her presence diminishing under the weight of a shared understanding that one person's control could never overshadow the collective heart of a community. As the evening wore on, residents began to disperse, their faces lit with satisfaction. The lights remained, a steadfast reminder of what we had reclaimed. I turned away from the brilliant display, feeling the warmth of solidarity settle into my bones. We had restored more than just our right to decorate our lawns. We had rekindled the spirit of our neighborhood. each bulb a flicker of individuality woven into the fabric of unity. Karen had been sidelined, not through confrontation, but through the simple act of standing together against the night. In the end, it wasn't just the office that had been transformed. It was all of us, standing in the glow of our shared triumph, illuminated in ways that went far beyond the reach of any light.